Welcome to Caribbean Business Review, where insight meets impact. We bring you economic and financial updates, sharp statistical breakdowns, and data-driven insights on the forces shaping the region. Smart analysis, bold ideas, real Caribbean intelligence. This is CBR. Welcome to episode 9 of season 2 of the Caribbean Business Review. I'm Joseph Cox. Now, first of all, thank you so much for your continued support across all our social media channels and MKR Radio. Our special guest this week is Professor Lloyd Waller, Executive Director of the Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center, as we discuss tourism in Jamaica in the aftermath of Hurricane Melissa. In the CBR briefing, we explore Cashless in Crisis, Jamaica's financial wake-up call, a clear-eyed analysis of the over-reliance on digital financial solutions, particularly in the wake of natural disasters. But before we get there, an important issue we believe deserves some attention. Now, Hurricane Melissa wasn't just a storm. It was a regional stress test that exposed how fragile our business continuity systems really are. With winds topping 185 miles per hour and gusts reaching as far as 252 miles per hour, Melissa simultaneously and in some cases consequentially disrupted power, banking, ports, and communications across Jamaica, Haiti, Cuba, the Bahamas, and Bermuda. In Jamaica, ATMs and digital payments networks collapsed, leaving employers and workers unable to access cash. Across the region, supply chains froze and data centers went dark. Melissa revealed that most continuity plans still assume local damage, not regional paralysis, and that's no longer good enough. Caribbean businesses must now plan for multi-jurisdictional disruption, not isolated crises. That means distributed cloud and data hosting across multiple islands or external regions, offline payment and payroll protocols to maintain liquidity during outages, cross-training of staff so critical roles can be performed manually or remotely, portable power solutions and microgrids to sustain essential operations, pre-approved mutual aid agreements among firms for shared logistics and warehousing. Continuity now means resilience through decentralization. And the lesson isn't for businesses alone. Governments and regulators also have much to absorb. Central banks must stress test financial institutions for prolonged digital outages. Chambers of Commerce should lead joint continuity audits across sectors, and regional institutions such as CDB, CRIF, and others must coordinate post-disaster liquidity support so firms can restart faster. Melissa proved the private sector cannot outsource resilience to insurance alone. Continuity is now a matter of national economic security, and in an era of climate-intensified hurricanes, survival isn't about restoring normal operations. It's about building systems that bend but don't break. Hurricane Melissa was the warning. What comes next must be the redesign. And with that, let's turn to the stories we are tracking this hour in Market Watch and Global Pulse. Coming up in the Market Watch, Hurricane Melissa inflicts a $20 billion blow on Jamaica's agriculture. Cayman Islands unveils a $2.5 billion 2-year budget. And Bahamas sees a 7% rise in bank lending. Then in Global Pulse, Canada's unemployment dips to 6.9%. There's a dire warning over AI-driven market bubble, and U.S. unemployment climbs to 4.4%. All that and more this hour on Market Watch and Global Pulse. Coming up next is a CBR briefing. This is your CBR briefing. I'm Joseph Cox. In the aftermath of Hurricane Melissa, Jamaica's push towards a cashless society has collided with a wall of reality. In Western Jamaica, where communities were battered by 185 mile per hour winds and gusts reaching 252 miles per hour, the financial system is under severe strain. With ATMs offline, retailers refusing checks, and banks limiting withdrawals, both public and private sector workers are discovering that digital efficiency means little when infrastructure fails. For thousands whose salaries were paid by wire or direct deposit, accessing their own money has become impossible. Melissa did more than topple power lines. It exposed a financial system without a safety net. Employers issued salaries on schedule, yet in the hardest hit parishes, those deposits are now numbers on a screen. Workers can't buy groceries or fuel, and the informal cash economy has become the only marketplace still functioning. Ironically, the very segment long excluded from formal finance has proven the most resilient in crisis. Jamaica has been praised for embracing Jamdex, mobile wallets, and online banking, but modernization without redundancy is fragility disguised as progress. Retailers in some towns reverted to cash only, while others shut their doors entirely. The outage of power and data networks showed how tightly the digital economy is tethered to the physical one. When the grid collapses, the system follows. This is a theory. It's daily reality. Workers can't withdraw pay. Small businesses can't restock. Parents can't buy food. People rebuilding homes or businesses are being told by hardware stores cash only. Imagine needing $1 million in materials, yet the bank limits withdrawals to $100,000, and the retailer won't take a manager's check. That's not policy debate, that's paralysis. The shortage of circulating cash has deepened stress and slowed recovery, especially in a country where half the adult population remains outside the formal banking system. Jamaica's financial inclusion strategy assumed digital equals resilient, but as the Bahamas' Sand Dollar and the ECCB's Dcash pilot show, offline capability must be part of any national digital currency. Jamdex still depends entirely on connectivity, leaving it vulnerable when it's most needed. To its credit, the Bank of Jamaica continues promoting Jamdex, but the Melissa experience makes clear that offline and contingency features can't wait. Preparedness must now include cash continuity plans for payrolls, offline settlement options for wallets, mobile cash units for isolated areas, and hybrid pay systems blending cash and digital during emergencies. A modern system must be resilient, not just efficient. Cash still matters, not because it's old, but because it works when nothing else does. Confidence in digital banking has been shaken. Many who resisted online platforms now feel vindicated after years of branch closures and rising fees, especially in rural communities. Melissa has exposed the cost of neglecting redundancy. Rebuilding trust will demand technology that performs under stress, backed by clear communication and visible reality. Dynamism drives innovation, and innovation drives growth. But the road to a digital economy must pass through resilience. A truly cashless society isn't one that abandons cash. It's one that ensures every Jamaican can reach their money when it matters most. This is a 90-second market brief. Hurricane Melissa damage in Jamaica is estimated at $7 billion US dollars, nearly one-third of GDP, with insured losses reaching $4.2 billion US dollars, according to Verisic. CRIF has earmarked for record payouts totaling $91.9 million US dollars, while losses in agriculture and fisheries exceed 20 billion Jamaican dollars, devastating key crops and aquaculture. In response, AICA has mobilized an emergency fund to support the recovery in Jamaica, the Bahamas, Haiti, and Dam Rep. In the Cayman Islands, Finance Minister Ralston Anglin presented a $2.5 billion two-year budget built on record revenues and fiscal surpluses, alongside immigration reforms to streamline 65,000 annual work permit applications and prioritize Caymanian employment. In Belize, tourism continues to power growth. Stopover arrivals rose 18% last year, but infrastructure and financing constraints remain. Bermuda's economy also remains stable. Inflation eased to 1.7%, retail sales rose 0.8%, and total bank assets climbed $24.5 billion US. In the Bahamas, bank lending grew 7% this year, though a widening housing affordability gap persists. Meanwhile, Guyana is positioning itself as the region's next manufacturing hub, leveraging natural gas power to halve energy costs by 2026. And the IDB has launched IDB Pay, a regional initiative to expand low-cost digital payment systems and extend financial inclusion. Well, that's our 90-second market brief. I'm Joseph Cox. For more on CBR, look for us on YouTube and Spotify.
In a world of constant change, insight is your greatest asset. At Joseph Cox & Associates, we empower innovation across the Caribbean. Whatever your challenge, we can help. We're proudly customer-centric, offering bespoke solutions tailored to every partner. From innovation and digital transformation to leadership and policy, our services are designed to deliver lasting impact. We partner with leaders across sectors, from finance and government to energy, tech, and infrastructure, helping them navigate complexity with confidence. Our work is grounded in collaboration. We connect regional leaders through powerful networks, driving change through joint research. Discover more at josephcox.org. Joseph Cox & Associates. Insight, experience, impact.
Still ahead on Caribbean Business Review, our conversation with Professor Lloyd Waller, Executive Director of the Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center, as we discuss tourism in Jamaica in the aftermath of Hurricane Melissa.
For the most part, currently, based on my estimation, I would say 60% of hotels are still open in Jamaica right now. By the 15th of December, that should actually increase to around 75-80%. At the end of January, at the very least 90%. And then after perhaps the end of April.
Welcome back to Caribbean Business Review. I'm Joseph Cox, and we're going to a strategy deep dive. And today our special guest is Professor Lloyd Waller, and he is the Executive Director of the Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center. And in welcoming you to the program, the question I suppose that really comes to mind as we look at the impact on the tourism, Jamaica's tourism industry in the aftermath of Hurricane Melissa is how have we fared in terms of the infrastructure, the general ecosystem. We're looking at it within the context of the physical infrastructure, the supply chain, and of course, the employment aspects of it. Just to give us a sense of what's going on, the scope.
So in terms of the three variables that you just identified or indicators, currently Kingston is open for business. Portland open for business. St. Mary, St. Anne, parts of Falmouth, parts of St. James, and certainly parts of Hanover and Westmoreland. The bulk of the damage, infrastructurally wise, was in St. Elizabeth. And there are few tourism places that are there that took some severe damage, but they're currently in the process of rebuilding very quickly. The Ministry of Tourism, from our engagement, has indicated that there is a phased reopening. For the most part, a lot of the infrastructure damage is they're in the process of addressing that. The usual, roofs and awnings and tents and windows and so forth, and they're in the process of addressing that. And based on the phased reopening, we should see St. James and Falmouth both open fully by the very least the end of January. Currently, the tourism sector itself, the persons in the sector, the various hoteliers and their staff and persons from the Ministry of Tourism, they are actually working on identifying solutions for this staff, because, as you know, that is certainly a challenge that is happening. So, for the most part, in the now, while the hotels reorganize themselves and address the damage that some of them had, in some instances, 5% damage, 3% damage, 10% damage. I don't remember, and these are the ones in Montego Bay specifically on the the kind of north coast stretching across, you know.
Yeah, but there's one when they Catalonia. I just call it the old
Right.
Holiday Inn.
Yeah,
They seem to have gotten a
the
good,
bulk of it.
yeah,
But at the same
yeah.
time, you know, we just have to realize that, you know, they were prepared for something like this in terms of a hurricane. They have already identified what the solutions are, and they've also indicated that they should be up and running as well by the end of January. So, you know, many of these, right? So many of these things is infrastructure. It's not laying of cement. You know, it's not rewiring. It's really just putting back the kind of fixtures that help to enhance the aesthetics and also shelter in some instances and convenience in some instances. But everyone seems to be working pretty fast to provide that kind of recovery. And while that is happening, the sector itself, practically everyone in the sector is working as it relates to humanitarian relief for the many workers that have been affected by the sector. We're talking about persons who their house was badly damaged. They currently have no access to water, power, internet, food, and there have been a number of relief efforts by the ministry as well as the private sector in terms of providing relief in that regard. While there's a move afoot by the government to provide some support in terms of the rehabilitation of their housing infrastructure. So the various committees and subcommittees that Minister Bartlett has put in place is currently in the process of identifying solutions. So the Jamaica Cares, they have been very active in terms of responding as it relates to humanitarian support, specifically as it relates to water and food, you know, to the critical aspects of the first phase of recovery in terms of ensuring that people live. You know, housing is good, but, you know, if you can have a house and if you don't have food, you die.
Well,
so,
clearly,
so housing is good. So right now the immediate need would be food and water and clothing and all other different amenities that which should be, you know, secondary, but the primary ones is ensuring that people can, you know, they don't die of starvation or dehydration, you know.
No, I can appreciate that, but you see, two things that I'm not, perhaps I just not understanding.
Tell me.
The road between Kingston and I'll go as far as to say Sandy Bay in Hanover. That is clear. I mean, I have a comment. I don't know who is responsible for it, whether it's a works agency or who it is, but those roads are completely clear, right? So in other words, the trucks and the delivery people can go through, right, and deliver where they need to, whether it be fuel, food, whatever it is, right? That's one aspect of it. But the other aspect of it now is because just looking at the hotels, and I'm not going to tell you I went into the hotels and I can tell you, you know, some granular analysis. I can't. But just passing by the hotels, you can see that, yes, some had, you're right, some look like a 3%, a 5% damage and so on and so forth. I'm trying to understand, now we are in November. Why is it that we will be pushing the startup for some of the hotels, one group, 8 of the hotels are closing now until the end of January? I'm trying to understand what is the reason for that lengthy delay when, to be honest with you, if you ask me, and I can't speak to the South Coast at all, I have not been there, I do not know. But for the North Coast, I cannot understand what is the reason for that long delay. The tourist winter season starts the 15th of December. Why push the things on to the end of January?
All right. So as you said, that's just certain properties, and certainly those properties would have had conversations with their stakeholders as it relates to why and make the necessary arrangements for whether or not the person goes to Cancun or whatever. But they have their unilateral conversations in that regard. For the most part, currently, based on my estimation, I would say 60% of hotels are still open in Jamaica right now. By the 15th of December, that should actually increase to around 75-80%.
Okay.
At the end of January, at the very least 90%, and then after perhaps the end of April. But the truth is, the properties that have indicated that they're unable to, they will not be open until the 31st of January. I think that was the
Right. Yes, that was the
notification.
date.
So, I mean, they would know why they have decided to identify that date, and they would certainly be in conversations with their stakeholders as it relates to alternative solutions, which could also be solutions in Portland and St. Anne. And I don't want to go into what they have done, but I
Right.
get the impression that this kind of reorganizing of the sector until Montego Bay is fully operational, or at least partially operational, is happening. But what the truth is that the sector is resilient, to be quite frank. Tourism has always been resilient. As a matter of fact, if you notice during COVID, tourism was one of the sectors that allowed us to stay economically sound. One off, not just but one off, you know. And
Right.
historically, we've seen hurricanes in Haiti, and a cruise ship just shows up, and within 24 hours, you know, livelihoods are restored. So the sector itself is resilient by the very nature and history of the sector. And that may account for one of the reasons why, you know, one has to ensure that the product itself is at a particular level, especially when inviting customers to enjoy the space. So again, I'm going to say they would know what were the reasons, but for the most part, as I said, currently up to 60, perhaps more % of Jamaica is open for tourism business, and you know, by the 15th of December, perhaps 75%, and then it will increase over time. But I think people do realize that it was a hurricane. It is a major disruption, and in some parishes, particularly St. Elizabeth, it is a crisis. And certainly the hotels, I must say thank you. Many of the hotels are currently in the process of housing the relief and the disaster and relief workers, you know, to try to see how best to get the disruption settled. Which will also add to it, you know, while the government itself is working on the other aspects of the infrastructure in terms of, as you said, rightfully, the roads. You know, Minister, the Honorable Darrell Vaz has been very strident where that is concerned. And it's very clear based on the utterances of the Prime Minister of Jamaica, Dr. Holness, Dr. the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, that this is his priority right now. Right, to getting the country back up and running. I mean, I can imagine a leader of a country having to go through something like this. You know,
it's not easy. Well, honestly, I mean,
but he has risen to the occasion as usual, and just in the very way in which he was able to marshal us and steer us through COVID, I'm pretty much sure he will do the same here.
Okay, no, I hear you on that, but again, you see, here are some of the issues I'm having now. Because when we're looking at our tourism product, first of all, just I mean, I don't know if you have done even a back of the envelope type of analysis to say how much money are we likely to lose. I mean, I know we were on track for Jamaica was on track for 5 million tourists by year end, but we give them this now. I don't know. Have you done any kind of back of the envelope calculations as to how much we will fall short, or will we fall short, or
no?
anything
GTRCMC, like that's not our remit, you know. But yeah, I'm almost certain that the ministry itself is doing the necessary calculation. But again, given the disruption, that kind of forecasting may take a little time, because the hotels themselves would have to gather the data first. And then after that, they would have to send the information to the ministry, and they would have to collate it and do an assessment of the true impact of it. So certainly that is happening right now. But again, the great thing about it is this, you know, Jamaica is an island, but it is a big island, you know, and there's a general concern normally when a Cat 5 hits an island, you know, and in this particular instance, given the fact that the size of the island, you know, the most of the island, unfortunately, was spared, and I think that all of us who have been spared, at the very least, need to try to at least find even $1,000 to contribute to the parts of the island that was not spared.
Absolutely.
I think just if you don't have the time to go, you know, try to find some way to donate. I think if we all work together and help, even $1, you know, it will go a far way in restoring the wonderful wonderful parish of St. Elizabeth, and ensuring that next year we would have 10 million tourists coming to Jamaica.
Quite so, quite so. But, just our matters was blowing our own horn here on this program. We run a crawl, which highlights the actual website, because we are conscious again of all sorts of charlatans coming out of the woodwork to try and capitalize on the tragedy. So we do run the website, etc., that people can make contributions to. But guide me with something. Because the other aspect of it, in terms of crisis management, is information flow. And one of the things that struck me as I traveled along the north coast of the country was that I would say once you got off the toll road, access to radio, literal radio, became spotty at best. And beyond, say, I would say probably Discovery Bay going down, that became non-existent. So there is no access to information.
Yeah, man,
and that worries me.
That's a function of down poles and and wires and towers, cell towers, and so forth. But that is a function of the private sector. Their response, and I'm sorry, I didn't want to say private sector. Let me be very specific. This is a function of the telecom companies and the power companies. And we live in a country that is prone to hurricane every year. There's a season. So I'm pretty much sure that they would have in place the necessary preparatory and recovery mechanisms, which we are seeing happening, but not necessarily as fast as we would want to see it happening. But I'm pretty much sure as the days go by, things will be better, because already we are seeing, last week there was a cry for internet, and we've seen how Starlink has now been integrated, has now become a household name in Jamaica, and certainly will now have a foothold in Jamaica, so as it relates to and also the telecommunication source. So it's a function of capacities, capabilities, and to be quite frank, I must also say that as a monitoring and regulatory organization, the government, so to speak, they have been very aggressive as it relates to ensuring that we are and transparent, as a matter of fact, in communicating to us about the progress and the challenges that both the telecom and the power companies and the water companies face, and after a Category 5 hurricane. And the usual circumstances, staff members have to deal with their own circumstances and their families. So it will not go as fast as we would want it to go, because the truth is, it is a Category 5 hurricane.
No,
and some people will say more than a Category 5. It's such a thing. Exactly, but the bottom line is that it is unprecedented. The wind speeds are unprecedented. So.
And but I don't want it to misunderstand the point, because let's be clear. We had sustained winds in the affected parts of 185 miles per hour. Don't ask me about no kilometers. I'm too old for that. But with wind gusts up to 252 miles per hour. Now I'm quite aware, and truthfully, as you pass along the coastal roads, to be honest, when you look even at some of the vegetation, aside from the physical houses, etc., when you look at some of the vegetation, it looks like a bomb went off in it. Honestly, it is that torn up and damaged. But that wasn't where I was going with the issue about the communication, because I'm also conscious, and wearing your hat as crisis management as well. I am conscious that you have persons out there, whether they're doing it for clicks, likes, or whatever the intent, there is a whole raft of misinformation that is being pushed through the communities. And my concern is that if you don't have access via radio. Of course, I don't see nobody selling no newspaper in those communities that at least I have gone through, right? And as you rightly said, a lot of stores, etc., are closed, eh? I'm still wondering, how do you combat that misinformation? Because nature, of course, a vacuum, and people will, do all sorts of things.
That's a problem. And I have to be very specific in terms of how I respond to that, because there are many different forms of misinformation happening
Okay.
right now. So let me be very specific to, I'm hoping that's what you're talking about, the information that is communicated to the people in the communities. Is that what you're
Right.
speaking specifically
Yes, I
of,
am.
and not
Yes, I
necessarily
am.
what's being communicated outside? All right. So in that particular instance, the usual modus operandi is that we turn to trusted sources, which would be traditional media. So radio is something that everyone has access to, even in instances where they don't have access to the internet. Radio is something that general people tend to have access to. Telephone
But they're
calls.
not getting it. Yeah.
In some instances, they have these little radios
No,
that
no,
they're
I don't mean
using.
that way. The signal not
Right.
going at all.
Well, in some instances they are, because I can tell
Okay.
you, in some instances they are. And then in addition to that, we do also have persons who are working on the ground who have access to information, who can communicate to them verbally. As it relates, these are the relief workers and the hurricane workers who know what they're
Right.
doing, who have instructions, who have guidelines, who know what the protocols are, who know what the government is doing, who know about what all the different stakeholders who are part of the mechanism. So when it comes to general information, and certainly they could communicate it. I must agree with you, though, that in instances that they don't have that kind of trusted or authoritative source, that we can expect some slippage and some misinformation that, and some by some scrupulous persons, who would use it as a mechanism to do harm to people. And it is an unfortunate circumstances that, and I'm going to say this too, that occurs after every major disaster. The scammers, I mean, you have people who will fly just to come to Jamaica to try to scam, and I'm using scamming as one of the most the lightest of what could possibly happen. So we need to also have the social workers there. We need to have persons from the Child Protective Agency there, to be able to mitigate against any possible harm, especially to children. But all of that is currently being worked out by the Ministry of Health, because they have now set up their field tent. I know for a fact that the psychologists, the sociologists, the social workers are already started working down there to deal with the post-traumatic stress disorder that may manifest as a result of this.
All right. Fair enough. But
But
tell me something.
the final answer is that we are hoping that we have well thinking, trusted Jamaicans who can act as that bridge, that information bridge for those persons who are now susceptible to this kind of misinformation.
My brother, I think the milk of human kindness in some of these instances is grossly overrated.
But the good thing about it is that not everybody. That's a good thing about it. It's
True.
not
That
everybody.
is absolutely true.
Most
That's
of us are
absolutely true.
most of us are still good and have a moral compass. It's not
but
everybody.
yeah, no, sure. But let me
And
ask you this.
sometimes we get a flack for that moral compass, but we use it nevertheless.
You live with it. All right. No, the other thing, though, that you also want to look at a bit is in terms of from where you sit, have you gotten a sense of how the market has responded to what is it? I mean, in the tourism market, the overseas market, how have they really responded to this? The average visitor. And compounding that is what I have said on this program before. The unfortunate how should I say, increase of the travel advisory by the United States to level 3 the day after a hurricane. I mean, honestly, I don't expect you to comment on that, but who does that? The day after a hurricane, you really push up a travel advisory, citing crime, etc., etc. Really?
So the market response has been phenomenal. The industry itself, the global industry, has been very responsive in terms of support, in terms of in-kind support, financial support. Several of the cruise lines have been also providing water, food supplies, sending it to Jamaica along with the cruise itself. And certainly it is a major hurricane, and Jamaica is a favorite destination for many persons around the world. Many persons have friends who are Jamaicans and plan to come to Jamaica. So the reality is that there has been a lot of sympathy and a lot of get well soon.
Okay. But tell me something. One, in terms of travel advisors, do they really have the kind of impact people try to say they have? That's one. And two, what is the effect, or what is the effect of declaring the entire island as a disaster area? I understand it probably triggers some funding, etc. But what's the point of doing that when, for example, Kingston, as you had pointed out before, and other areas of the, call it the eastern side of the island, are basically fit for purpose?
So regarding the first question, I don't have any empirical evidence to respond to that question effectively.
Okay.
As it relates to the second question, what's the second question again? Sorry, what's the second question?
No, in terms of declaration of the
Oh yeah. I think I did, and I'm trying to see how politically correct I can be. I did.
You don't
say
need to be.
earlier. I did say something earlier, which would perhaps answer your question. That whenever a hurricane passes over an island, there's an assumption that is made because of small island developing states kind of perspective of what island states are, but Jamaica is a bigger island. So it could be that historically, each time a hurricane passes over a island, that the entire island is affected. But in this particular instance, that's not the case. Kingston is open for business, St. Thomas, St. Portland, St. Anne, St. Mary, St. Catherine, and parts, certainly for a greater part of Portland, a greater part of St. James, Westmoreland, Hanover. As I said, the properties are damaged in most instances, not necessarily severely damaged, and will be up and running within 1 to 3 months, to be quite frank.
Okay.
And they've already started the process. So I guess it's a perspective, it's a lens, looking at Jamaica as an island from a kind of small island developing state lens. You're just going to see Jamaica as an island, and a hurricane hit the island, and it's the whole island. And we can understand that, to be quite frank. You're there and you're not here, and the dynamics are not known. So I can understand that. But we are here, and we know, and we see, and we live. And
but the challenge, of course, I agree with you. But the challenge that we face is that from our own country, as it were, from the country itself, it is being promoted. This is a disaster zone, and of course, my heart goes out to the people in St. Elizabeth and Westmoreland and Hanover and so on. And Trelawney, because trust me, if you hear people coming out of places like Stewarttown and they're telling you what happened to them, it's not.
The most I'll say is that the most I'll say in this response is that it is in different actors' interest to articulate and represent the outcomes of the hurricane.
This is
what you want. Pick from what you want.
That is absolutely tragic, honestly, because when you start to do that, you undermine, and you see, it comes like when you go around and you badmouth your country. Frankly speaking, even though people may do it, some people do it for political purposes, some people do it for all sorts of purposes. The fact of life is that the damage is
the moral compass I spoke earlier.
Yeah, I guess you're right. All right, but now we start to look at the rebuilding aspect of it, the rebuilding phase. Realistically, when you start to have wind gusts of 252 miles per hour, frankly speaking, to what extent can you truly, I know the phrase, build back better? It sounds wonderful. It's a wonderful buzz phrase. But realistically, what does that really mean within this sort of context where what was one in a, I don't know, I call it 1 in 100-year event is now once probably every year or every 2 years? How is it that we really recover from that? How does the industry recover from this to indemnify itself? Tourism.
I mean, as I said to you before, we are currently recovering. We are, some have already recovered. To be quite frank, some have already recovered and can take guests, but they're concerned for the staff, and
no, you're missing my point. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about where you go that you indemnify your property, as it were. To what extent can you really build against and protect against 250-mile-per-hour wind gust. Sorry.
I that's an infrastructure. I don't think I'm qualified to answer that one.
Yeah.
I mean, from a very parochial and extremely ignorant standpoint, slab on concrete. From a very ignorant standpoint, slab on concrete.
I hear you on that. I hear you on that. But you see, the issue is this, because part of it that we have to also be very mindful of is that we don't end up losing our cultural identity. You understand? That is also part of it.
I think as from putting on my sociology hat, I think we have a very powerful culture. An extremely rich heritage, an extremely rich history. I mean, it's Jamaica. Come on, it's Jamaica. It's that I don't even think we should even worry about something like that.
But you see,
which other country do you go and see someone wearing the colors of their national flag everywhere? And you can easily identify that is a Jamaican, because everywhere you go, you see the green, the black, and the yellow, and you know it's such. I mean, even recently I went somewhere and I was in a train, and the Jamaicans that came in proudly wearing their Jamaican color, because they know the history and the culture and the strength of our brand and our culture. So
I totally understand that. But the point is simply is that some of the cultural experience would be involved, like the various types of little huts that you do, even some of the roadside, what I call the roadside stores, as it were. I mean, honestly, in traveling through at least the parts of the North Coast that I have, thus far, a lot of those, what I would have considered the mom and pop type of operations, the small operation type one, those have gotten a really hard knock. There are supply chain issues because some of the storage areas in some of the major towns have been affected, adversely impacted. So the getting supplies to them is a challenge. They've suffered in some cases major infrastructure. In some cases, if you ask me, they were kind of wiped out. But the point is simply is that I'm just wondering, frankly, with these things being once every couple of years now, these kinds of, extraordinary wind events being every couple of years, how do you establish that type of resilient infrastructure while maintaining that authenticity? Right, that is the word.
More like the aesthetics of what an island tourist state should, little straw huts and so forth. I mean, it can
that kind of things.
There are many different ways in which you can do it. Put them on wheels, have them the structure to pull them apart. I mean, the bottom line is that the business community has experienced this, a Category 5 hurricane for the first time. We were prepared for a Category 3 because we remember Gilbert, but for the first time, we've in modern history we have a Cat 5, and as usual, as human beings, we're going to learn from this. We're going to find solutions. We're going to identify ways in which to mitigate and because we are resilient people, as you said, we are totally resilient.
Indeed, but I mean, I always remember for my part with Gilbert, I lost power September 12, 1988, and the power returned December 18, 1988. I know I'm seeing stories of communities almost erupting because they lost power for a week.
And yet, Joseph, you are here.
Yes, indeed.
Exactly. Yet you are here.
No, but I mean, but
we overcome. It's an inconvenience, certainly, and a major disruption for many of us. But as I said, when I started, I'll come back to that as I close. That if we all work together, we can rebuild bigger and better. If it's even $100, a contribution here and there, and then and also to realize that this is also a contribution you're going to have to make, as you rightfully said, for a while, because the assistance you give today will be gone tomorrow, and the assistance will also be needed day after tomorrow. So that's also something to recognize, that we need to be in this for the long haul.
Of course.
until our brothers and sisters in the Western parishes are settled
Of course.
mentally and physically.
On that note, I'm afraid that's where we have to end it for today. So our very special thanks to Professor Lloyd Waller, who is the Executive Director of the Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center in Jamaica, for that insightful conversation, because indeed what has happened with Hurricane Melissa is truly extraordinary and will require all hands on deck. And one does hope that the tourism industry, which represents some 35% of the Jamaican economy, or 35% of GDP, will be able to be truly resilient, because these once in 100 years events are suddenly becoming once every 1 or 2 years. So more or none, I suspect. So, but thank you so much to Professor Waller for his interventions.
In a world of constant change, insight is your greatest asset. At Joseph Cox and Associates, we empower innovation across the Caribbean. Whatever your challenge, we can help. We're proudly customer-centric, offering bespoke solutions tailored to every partner. From innovation and digital transformation to leadership and policy, our services are designed to deliver lasting impact. We partner with leaders across sectors, from finance and government to energy, tech, and infrastructure, helping them navigate complexity with confidence. Our work is grounded in collaboration. We connect regional leaders through powerful networks, driving change through joint research. Discover more at josephcox.org. Joseph Cox and Associates. Insight, experience, impact.
Welcome to Market Watch. I'm Joseph Cox. We begin in Jamaica, where the government faces its largest natural disaster bill in modern history. Hurricane Melissa caused between 6 and 7 billion US dollars in damage, up to 32% of GDP, and destroyed more than 116,000 buildings. Prime Minister Andrew Holness says fiscal rules may be suspended as recovery spending ramps up. The National Housing Trust has announced a 6-month mortgage moratorium, $3.5 million home improvement loans, and grants of up to $500,000 for affected borrowers. Jamaica's agriculture sector has also been devastated, with losses exceeding 20 billion Jamaican dollars. 90% of banana and plantain crops were destroyed, while fisheries lost a quarter of boats and 41% of aquaculture farms. The Agro-Investment Corporation reports an additional 688 million Jamaican in damage across agro-parks and production zones, affecting more than 250 farmers. Relief efforts are accelerating. CRIF has earmarked for disbursement $91.9 million US dollars, the largest payout in its history. Meanwhile, analytics firm Forensic estimates insured property losses at up to $4.2 billion US dollars, or roughly 20% of GDP. Across the region, AICA has launched an emergency fund to support the hardest hit countries, Jamaica, the Bahamas, Haiti, and the Dominican Republic, financing relief, rehabilitation, and farm recovery initiatives. In the Bahamas, CRIF has already paid out $1.3 million US dollars under its rainfall policy after Tropical Storm Imelda, while authorities assess further claims from Hurricane Melissa. At the same time, commercial bank lending in the Bahamas is up 7% year to date, driven by energy-related investments, even as mortgage growth slows. Turning to the Cayman Islands, Finance Minister Ralston Anglin tabled a $2.5 billion two-year budget projecting record revenues and surpluses through 2027, supported by tighter fiscal oversight and new healthcare funding. Separately, the new Cayman Protection Act aims to overhaul immigration, streamline 65,000 annual work permit applications, and prioritize local employment. In Bermuda, the economy remains steady. Banking assets rose to $24.5 billion US dollars, while inflation cooled to 1.7% in June. Retail sales grew 0.8% year-on-year, with gains in auto, fuel, and building materials signaling consumer resilience. Further south, Trinidad and Tobago is targeting a $5 billion export boost and $9 billion US dollars in investments over 5 years. Meanwhile, Guyana continues its rise as a regional manufacturing powerhouse, with natural gas fuel power generation set to start in 2026. Electricity costs could fall from 31 US cents to 12 cents per kilowatt hour, spurring industrial expansion. And in Belize, tourism arrival jumped 18% in 2024, but infrastructure and finance constraints remain. New airports, port modernization, and labor reforms aim to close gender and investment gaps and sustain inclusive growth. Finally, the IDB has launched IDB Pay, a regional initiative to expand digital financial inclusion and real-time payment systems across the region, part of a broader push to link unbanked citizens to modern finance. And now a quick look at the regional markets. On the Forex market, the Jamaican dollar traded at $161.04 to the US dollar, while the Trinidad and Tobago dollar at TT $6.80 and the Suriname dollar at $38.80, and while the Barbados dollar continues to trade at $2.03. All other currencies remained unchanged. Regionally, the JSC index eased 0.47%, while Trinidad and Tobago's all TNT index gained 0.84%. Barbados and Bermuda were marginally higher, and the Bahamas traded flat. Top gainers on the Jamaica Stock Exchange included 138 Student Living, up 18.9%, and Radio Jamaica up 12.6%, while Pulse Investments and Mayberry Equities led declines. Now, this has been your Market Watch on CBR. I'm Joseph Cox. Global Pulse is up next. This is Global Pulse. I'm Joseph Cox. We begin with the U.S., where the Chicago Federal Reserve estimates unemployment rose to 4.4% in October, the highest since 2021, as hiring slowed and layoffs mounted during the record 36-day government shutdown, which furloughed about 750,000 workers. The shutdown also forced the U.S. Transportation Department to cut flights by 10% at 40 major airports, citing safety concerns as air traffic controllers and TSA staff continue working unpaid. Meanwhile, the services sector showed resilience, with the ISM Services PMI rose to 52.4, its best in 7 months, supported by strong new orders. Adding to the uncertainty, the U.S. Supreme Court heard arguments challenging President Trump's global tariffs imposed under the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act. The case could reshape trade authority and global market stability when a ruling arrives in 2026. Canada's labor market rebounding added 66,600 jobs in October, cutting unemployment to 6.9%. Retail and transport led the gains, while wages rose 4% year-on-year. However, Finance Minister Francois Philippe Champagne's first budget projects a $78 billion deficit, offset by a $141 billion in new investment, 40,000 public sector job cuts, and a halving of temporary immigration. Debt servicing costs are rising, forecast to hit $76 billion by 2030, but remain manageable at just 2.1% of GDP. In London, the Bank of England voted 5-4 to hold interest rates at 4%. Governor Andrew Bailey also warned that artificial intelligence, while boosting productivity, could fuel a speculative market bubble as valuations in tech stocks appear historically stretched. Meanwhile, Chancellor Rachel Reeves signaled tax increases ahead of her November 26 budget to plug a £22 billion fiscal gap. Over in Asia, China's exports fell 1.1% in October, with shipments to the U.S. plunging 25%, extending a 7-month slide. Imports rose just 1%, reflecting weak domestic demand. The recent Trump-Xi truce paused new tariffs and cut U.S. fentanyl-related import tariff on Chinese goods from 20% to 10%, lowering China's effective U.S. tariff rate to 33%. In Japan, real wages fell 1.4% year-on-year in September, marking 9 straight months of decline. And in South Korea, major investment banks upgraded the country's 2026 GDP forecast to 1.9%. In Brazil, the trade surplus jumped 70% to $7 billion in October, driven by booming exports of oil, soya bean, and iron ore, particularly to China. Meanwhile, Mexico's central bank cut rates to 7.25%, signaling caution on further easing as core inflation remains sticky above 4%. Turning to the markets, in commodities, oil prices edged higher as traders weighed tighter global supplies against weaker Chinese demand. WTI crude rose 0.54% to US 59.75, while Brent gained 0.49%. The OPEC basket inched up 0.12%, but natural gas slipped 0.96% to $4.32. On the equities side, U.S. markets were mixed. The Dow Jones and S&P 500 posted small gains, while the Nasdaq fell 0.21%. In Europe, the FTSE 100, DAX, and CAC 40 all closed lower, mirroring weaker sentiment across Asia, where Japan's Nikkei 225 dropped 1.9%, and Hong Kong's Hang Seng fell nearly 1%. Now that's your Global Pulse. I'm Joseph Cox, and this is the Caribbean Business Review. Well, that's a wrap on episode 9 of season 2 of the Caribbean Business Review. Now, thank you so much to our loyal audience across MKR Radio and all our digital platforms for your continued support. As always, we live by our mantra that knowledge is strength, but information is power. A special thanks to our guest, Professor Lloyd Waller, Executive Director of the Global Tourism Resilience and Crisis Management Center, for his insights on Jamaica's tourism industry in the aftermath of Hurricane Melissa. What are some of the key takeaways? We believe that the most severe damage from Hurricane Melissa was concentrated in parts of Western Jamaica with a limited tourism footprint. Overall, sectoral impact has been modest, with 60% of hotels already open and full reopening of St. James and Falmouth expected by end of January. The global tourism community, including cruise partners, has shown strong solidarity through financial and in-kind support, and authorities have launched a proactive information campaign to counter misinformation and reinforce confidence in Jamaica's recovery. Now, please remember that you can listen to this broadcast at your convenience on Spotify. The latest edition of the Caribbean Financial Dispatch is live on LinkedIn, WhatsApp, and linked in the YouTube comments. To subscribe, please email us at caribbeanbusinessreview@gmail.com. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and follow Caribbean Business Review on TikTok, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, X, and LinkedIn. Until next week, same time, same place, I'm Joseph Cox, and this has been CBR.